Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susanna Suisuiki. Coming up.
There is no law we're going to pass from Parliament that can become law unless the King signs it.
Things get messy in Tonga's Parliament. Also, a new research hub in Melbourne aims to tackle the Pacific's biggest problems. And
it's going to be an amazing time to showcase and be proud of our culture.
The world's largest Polynesian city gears up for its 32nd Pasifika festival. Tonga's parliament has seen outbursts and heated arguments this week, with 2 MPs suspended from the House for being disruptive. It occurs in the midst of a destabilising standoff between the country's King Tupou VI and Prime Minister Siausi Sovaleni Huakawe Meiliku. Whina Whanua has more.
The sitting started with a prayer and hymn, but within an hour was reduced to outbursts and allegations. In this fiery exchange, People's Representative Biveni Bilkala threatened to hit Noble's representative, Lord Tuilakepa, who had accused him of conspiring to undermine the king and parliament. Lord Tuilakepa went on a rant of his own before the House Speaker, Lord Whakawhanua, switched off the microphones and ordered a police sergeant to escort the pair outside. Earlier on, Bilkala had a similar altercation with the Prime Minister, Huakawa Meiliku, when he raised allegations of financial mismanagement in relation to Tonga's national Lulutai Airlines. Their debate was also cut short. On Monday, the Speaker also lost his patience and lashed out at People's Representative Moale Finau and Noble's Representative Lord Nuku for trying to debate an issue that wasn't on the agenda. The issue was about an unprecedented standoff between the King and Prime Minister, which has yet to be resolved. It started last month when the government received a letter from the Privy Council saying the King had lost confidence in the ministerial appointments for defence under Prime Minister Huakawa Meiliku and Foreign Affairs Minister Fekita Utoikamanu. Acting on the advice of the Attorney General that this was unconstitutional, the PM has publicly stood his ground and maintained the ministerial appointments. But he is finding himself increasingly isolated, with all of Tonga's 9 noble representatives last week calling on him to give up the ministerial portfolios in respect of the King's wishes. People's Representative Biveni Bilkala told RNZ Pacific that he and others were also unhappy with the way the PM publicly challenged the King and said the dispute had to be quickly resolved.
We have to sort our relationship with the monarch before we continue. After all, there is no law we're going to pass from Parliament that can become law unless the King signs it. So to me, we look stupid to continue to ignore that very issue.
Huakawa Meiliku has informed MPs that he would be having an audience with the King and urged them to be patient. RNZ Pacific has reached out to the Prime Minister for comments.
A new research hub dedicated to addressing some of the biggest issues facing the Pacific has been set up in Melbourne. Launched this week, the Oceania Institute at the University of Melbourne brings together researchers to highlight the challenges that directly affect Pacific peoples, such as the climate crisis. The name Oceania Institute was chosen to show respect and celebrate the custodianship that people of the Pacific have for their seas and islands. Joining me on the show is the Institute's co-director, Professor John Barnett. Kia ora, Professor John. First of all, tell me about the Oceania Institute. When did the idea to set this up all started?
It emerged a couple of years ago. The university has a strategic plan for global engagement with several regions in the world, and Oceania is one that the university felt it needed to improve its commitment to, and so it comes from that idea.
How many Pacific researchers members are there currently? Are any of them from the region?
We have, on the staff, there are, I think, 3 or 4 staff from the region and the university, but the number of Pasifika people who are on staff at university is pretty low, certainly compared to New Zealand universities. We have 65 students studying master's courses in the university from the region, as well as 8 PhDs, and certainly one of our missions is to grow the presence of Pasifika people on the campus.
Can you outline the issues that your research hub is addressing?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've taken a stock of the research that across the university that is done, and it tends to fall into 7 areas of research. There's a lot of work around climate change, and most of that is social science work looking at the human experience of climate change and thinking about ways that people could adapt in the region and helping to support adaptation solutions in the region to support people's lives. There's a range of work around food and livelihoods and biodiversity, being done around food security and biodiversity conservation and improving livelihoods. There's a significant body of work in the areas of population health and human well-being, which is focusing on a lot of work under that theme on gender issues in the region. Probably the largest body of work is around infectious diseases. The university has an incredibly large medical science program that is doing a lot of work in training, monitoring and responses to infectious diseases and the full range of them. Some work around language and culture and history that is more coming from the humanities areas, looking at language and culture and histories of Pacific people. Some work around law and peace and politics, particularly around peace building and justice around gender, and finally some work around urban sustainability. How do we deal with problems of informality in growing cities and how to make cities more sustainable into the future?
How do you plan on engaging with local Pacific communities in Melbourne?
Yes, it's a key area of our research. We don't see, I guess, a difference between Pasifika people in the region and the Pasifika people in Melbourne. They're all one people who are shared ties, and so it's an interesting situation that Melbourne is a rapidly growing centre for Pasifika people to live, and many of the Pasifika people in Melbourne have been New Zealand residents and haven't been actually able to access the higher education contribution scheme that enables them to come to university. So there's lots of young people of Pasifika descent in Melbourne who are not able to actually attend tertiary institutions, but there's been a recent rule change in the residency and they now are eligible. So we really want to go and speak to the schools where there are larger numbers of Pacific students and encourage them to think about attending this university or other universities and helping to kind of broker that process. That's a key objective of ours, to increase the Pacifica student population. We have now made, I think, a good first connection with the United Pacific Council of Victoria and really communicated to them that rather than us deciding what we think we can do to help them, we would really welcome a conversation where they bring issues to us and we explore how we can help them deal with the challenges that they face.
You said that there's no difference between the Pacific communities in Melbourne and in the region, so will you be engaging with the people out in the Pacific region as well?
Yeah, of course. That's also a huge focus, and a lot of that research that I talked about, most of that research that I talked about is engaging with the region. There are, over the last 5 years, been 85 projects been run through the university, research projects for the most part, that have engaged with every country and territory and a huge range of partners in the region. And a lot of that work is very applied, practical stuff, vaccinating children, language conservation efforts, climate change adaptation efforts. So they're partnering with specific organisations within governments rather than more regional level type work.
Will any of the research have an influence on a political level in Australia?
That's a good question. I guess one of the characteristics when you look at what happens at the university as opposed to other universities in Australia and New Zealand, there is much less of that thinking about high-level security things and Pacific studies type things. Most of this is really bilateral cooperation on a more technical level. But I think it's hard to avoid, and some of our funding comes from the Australian government, and it's very hard to avoid the question of Australia's role in the region, which I do think isn't quite well positioned just yet.
Speaking of Australia's position in the region, I know that climate change is your area of specialty. What are your thoughts on the Australia-Tuvalu partnership?
Yeah, we recently heard from the incoming Prime Minister, Feleti Teo, that partnership was, in his view, signed prematurely, which was, I think, an interesting observation. I think this question of, and it's a very interesting partnership, partly because it has elements of climate change in it, it has elements of security in it, and has elements of migration in it, and they're tied together in the text of that agreement. I think the security elements of that are extremely controversial, and I suspect that is where a lot of the sensitivity in Tuvalu lies. I think the issues about climate change adaptation are good. Australia has committed to supporting an extension of the Tuvalu Climate Adaptation Program, which is a really good one, and that's a good thing to do. And then I think the migration components are, it really depends on the details of that agreement. We know that where people from the region are able to travel to countries and work and live in countries like Australia and New Zealand, and they're treated as citizens, they have same access to the justice system, the same wages and working conditions, access to healthcare and education, paid the same, free to leave and return, that has some losses associated with it in the region, but also some huge potential gains. And so people, if the Whalapili Treaty gives people from Tuvalu a choice to leave and to return, and they are treated as Australian citizens, then I think that's not a bad thing to create that choice, and that will have benefits for Tuvalu. If, however, they are treated as seasonal workers, they're not treated as citizens, they are not paid as well, their worker conditions are not protected well, they have to pay for access to healthcare and education and so on. I recently heard, for example, that if you're a seasonal worker and you get pregnant, you are not able to access the Australian healthcare system. So if we're treating them as a class of sub-citizens who are simply working, then I think that's probably not going to be very positive for the migrants and not very positive for Tuvalu, and a little bit shameful for Australia, really.
Why has it taken so long to set up a dedicated Pacific research hub in Australia?
It's a good question. I think. I mean, there are some other centres of excellence in Australia. The Australian National University has a long-standing Pacific Studies program, and it comes from the tradition of Pacific Studies, which is much more of a kind of humanities and social science thing, studying the cultures and peoples of the Pacific. I don't think that's ever been something that's a tradition at the University of Melbourne, and I think it's clear now that we've looked, actually, that the university has had these long-standing forms of cooperation and engagement with the region, and I think what we're trying to do is leverage that, coordinate that better, see how we could kind of make that work better for people in the region, as well as for the university. I mean, we learn and we benefit from working in the region as well. So I think why it's taken so long, I don't know, but I think the time is now.
Would you say that this research hub is also a response to the geopolitical tensions between the US and China?
That's a good question. I don't think it is. I mean, I've been involved in the discussions internally. I don't think that is the motivation. I don't know. I mean, I think the geopolitical tensions between China and Australia have certainly stimulated us to think about our place in the region and to do better, I think, and to do it differently to, the way the Australian government has gone about it. So, yeah, perhaps that context is important, but incidentally, I suspect.
You mentioned earlier in our interview that there are some upcoming projects. Can you speak more to that, please?
Yeah, we have... well, it's difficult for me to speak about the projects that other researchers are doing across the region, but the Oceania Institute has funded a series of engagement grants that are ongoing, and they include some work on contextualising education for sustainable development in the region, some training in paediatric oncology for postgraduate students from Papua New Guinea, some work on creating terrestrial tabu conservation area in Melanesia. We've got a really great project where a staff member here has long collected oral narratives on the Trobriand Islands as has compiled a book and is taking that back there to them, and as well as some work in more technical medical areas. So they're smaller things that the Institute itself has funded that are ongoing.
A turtle tour owner in the Cook Islands says he's not signed the latest safety agreement between operators because it's inadequate. The latest MOU comes after a New Zealander died in the passage in December when he went out snorkelling by himself. The majority of the turtle tour operators have agreed to new safety and environmental standards with Cook Islands Tourism, but Snorkel Cook Islands owner Josh Utanga is not convinced. He says he wants restrictions on boat use around swimmers in Awaroa Passage to be added. However, Cook Islands Tourism told RNZ Pacific Snorkel Cook Islands did not sign the MOU because the business is unable to agree to all the safety and environmental standards, including the requirements of a 1-to-4 guide-to-client ratio. Caleb Fotheringham speaks to Mr. Utanga about the agreement.
It's not what's in the MOU, it's what's missing from the MOU. I would just like to see them take more of a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach. So my main point is obviously the use of boats in that skinny channel. At the moment, there's only 3 operators using the boats. But let's think proactively here. What's stopping 15 operators using the boats? What's stopping Captain Tumblers coming and dropping a big glass bottom boat in the middle of it? So it's just like, if you're going to include these types of, what they're trying to get them across the line as safety vessels, like you obviously don't need 15 safety vessels in a passage. Where does it end? Are they thinking about the consequences? Are they thinking down the track 5-10 years time? And how they're going to look after this precious stretch of water, and how is it going to be sustainable from a business point of view, from an environmental point of view, and from a safety point of view? How is it going to be sustainable 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the track? Obviously, my biggest concern at the moment is like the boats in such close proximity to bathing swimmers in the water. I know in Australia and New Zealand, you're not allowed within 60 metres of a bathing swimmer, unless you're a rescue craft such as an IRB or a jet ski. And they obviously use them in rescue situations only. At the moment, these operators, yes, they are only taking small groups of 12 to 16 packs per tour, but they're trying to fit like 3 or 4 tours into one tide. So therefore, they need to taxi their guests in quickly so they can get the next guests out there. There's been too many times where they're like whistling and yelling at swimmers in the water to move out of the way so they can quickly taxi their guests in, which is not the right protocols, because a bathing swimmer in the water always has right of way over a motorboat. So that's where where it sort of grinds my gears a little bit, where they're trying to say they're used as safety vessels, because it's not the ideal safety vessel, because you can't actually maneuver quick enough to be used as a safety vessel when you've got so many swimmers in the water. I know that we've been accused of overcrowding the passage with 40 packs or so. I guess my argument to that is, like, if they're not coming with us, they're going to be going with somebody else, and then we're opening up the door for more and more operators. So sure, I am trying to sort of obviously have our market share and protect our market share, and that's why we've sort of adapted to this lifeguarded area operating model.
Yeah, I just want to talk about that for a sec, because you may have seen, but Cook Islands Tourism, they said the reason that you didn't sign the MOU was because of your business model, and that it didn't...
No, it's totally incorrect, matey. Like, our business model can actually fit in with the whole MOU, 1-to-4 and everything. Like, this morning we had 24 packs, and I had 7 guards on, mainly because I did have a school group, which is becoming more and more prevalent for us. We're getting a lot of school groups through adventure tours in New Zealand, and I think tomorrow we have a new school travel organisation that's joining us. And these types of clientele, they're wanting a RAMS form, they're wanting to know our health and safety standards, and obviously I can provide that with my whole background. I'm all about the health and safety, but the one thing I can't guarantee for them is the external risks and hazards that these other operators are adding to an already dangerous stretch of water.
Do you think the way that the passage is run at the moment, there will be another accident like the death that happened in December?
Oh, 100%, matey. So like I've always said, because we were the established operator, we had beachfront access. And I felt it was my responsibility, or our responsibility as a company, because we're bringing attention to the passage. It's our responsibility to look after our workplace at all times. Because if there's a drowning there, it's a bad look on an industry as a whole, and on our snorkeling location as a location. So, and for Cook Islands Tourism, as a whole as well. You got to think about all the investors, the accommodation investors, all the food and beverage investors. Every time there's a front page of the New Zealand Herald, a tourist drowns in the Cook Islands, mate, it's a big cross against the Cook Islands as a destination.
Yeah, does there need to be a permanent lifeguard at the spot? Is that a solution?
Oh, that is definitely a solution. I've harped on for a long time that we've needed a lifeguard service, and I guess that's what I am trying to provide. Obviously, it's hard to funding wise and stuff, and having to get involved with NGOs and stuff. It's really hard to get that proposal across the line. So I thought, look, I'll do a social business plan, and that's pretty much what I've created, and that's where we're trying to move to is lifeguarding that area. So this year I've purchased red and yellow flags. I'm lucky enough that we've made a connection with New Zealand Surf Life Saving. Because we're in New Zealand territory, we're looking at starting a surf life saving club in Rarotonga connected with Surf Life Saving New Zealand. We've sort of had the all go in that part. So they started to supply us gear. They're supplying us workbook manuals and bronze medallion exams. Last year I put eight locals through the New Zealand Surf Life Saving bronze medallion with the help of Emma Sutherland, who she came and did 3 months work for us, and she's also a surf life saving assessor and instructor. So we're sort of trying to move in some positive steps that way. I know, look, I am aware that Awaroa has two major safety signs warning people that it's a dangerous stretch of water and not to enter the water. However, these signs have sort of lost their significance because people aren't really adhering to them because, the tourists are sort of looking, well, like there's like 15 operators all heading out there. Like, so it's sort of like, undermining the significance of the signs. I know that they say they put up the signs and, they're sort of hiding behind the signs and in terms of the drowning last year, but I just don't think it's good enough.
Right. I suppose there's a bit of a balance because it seems to me at the moment the main message that people are getting across is do a tour because that's going to be the safest thing to possibly do, and don't go out by yourself. And I'm just wondering if we've got lifeguards on the beach and we're patrolling Awaroa Passage, is that kind of encouraging people to maybe go out on their own and then they put themselves at risk in that way?
At the end of the day, you cannot deny any human being access to Mother Nature. Even when I was lifeguarding on the Gold Coast and I have the red flag up, beach closed, the best I can do is go down there and say, mate, the beach is closed. Please don't go out in the water for your own safety. And also for me, when you get in trouble, I'm going to have to come and get wet and come and rescue you. So please don't go out in the water. That's the best I can do. I can't physically stop them from entering the ocean. Right,
so people are going to do it regardless.
People are going to do it regardless. They already are. They're catching on going, well, there's all these people out there and, the operators really don't have much better swimming ability than me. So, what's stopping me? They're going out there and having to go themselves anyway. It's going to become more and more prevalent as the passage is more exposed around knowledge and education and how the passage works. And it's going to become more and more prevalent. That's why I'm asking these guys to be proactive and think 5, 10, 15 years down the track.
11 Pacific countries will be represented at this weekend's Pasifika Festival in Auckland. The annual event promises world-class cultural performances, traditional soul food, indigenous arts and crafts, and much more. It's the second year the festival is being held since the COVID-19 pandemic. Tiana Haxton spoke to the major events group manager, Jeb Savali, to chat about what the prestigious festival is all about.
It's an opportunity for our Pasifika families right throughout Tamaki Makaurau and further afield to showcase their language, celebrate their culture, celebrate who they are as tangata moana in this place of Aotearoa. You can expect to see the colours, the sights, the smells and the sounds of Pasifika on display for all at this festival. So it's going to be an amazing time to showcase and be proud of our culture and showcase it to the world.
There's such a big Pasifika community living here in Aotearoa, especially here in Auckland. What does this actually mean for our Pasifika people to have such a massive festival?
That's a great question. It's the pride. We're arguably living in the capital of Polynesia of the world. We're up to 300,000 people that hail from, the Pacific. And so it's an opportunity for us to take a section of each of those villages and communities that are represented here in Aotearoa to really bring them to life through these cultural performances, through their art, through their craft, through food, and through fashion.
Amazing. And tell me a little bit about the preparations. What really goes on behind the scenes to get such a festival like this off the ground?
So I want to acknowledge the Pacific Village Charitable Trust, who Tautaki Auckland Unlimited partner with. They're a very large part of the planning and preparation over what is essentially 12 months worth of planning. And with them, we plan what this festival might look like. There's a theme that goes with the festival. And, for this year, we're the second festival back from COVID. And so with that, we're really excited to be able to showcase again what Tamaki Makaurau and audiences around Auckland are used to, but also some new things that we're doing with the Auckland Pasifika Festival. So we're in a phase, evolution of Pasifika Festival. And I think it's a good thing to be able to be agile and manage change in this way. For us, though, at the heart of this festival is our Pasifika community. And that's at the core. And the value of our festival is being able to showcase our communities and celebrate them to the world.
Amazing. And I was checking out on the website, and you've got different countries being represented at the festival. How exciting is that? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so actually there's 11. So Aotearoa, Cook Islands, Hawaii, Fiji, Tokelau, Niue, Samoa, Tonga, and Tahiti are all showcasing their wares from their own corners of the Pacific. And so with that, there's a real showcase of language. Language is important to us. It's our identity, and it demarcates us one from the other. In the same way, though, we're celebrating colour, life, cultural, contemporary performances. It's a family affair. It's one for all ages. So you'll see on stages, you'll see everyone from your niece, your nephew, your son, all the way through to our kaumātua and our older population that will be also showcasing it. I think it's a really unique time to be able to celebrate everything that is us as tangata moana and of the Pacific.
That's Pacific Waves for today. To listen back, head over to rnzi.com/programs. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, so far, sweet for.